there, and welcome to Wild for Scotland, a podcast full of inspiring stories from Scotland. I'm your host, Kathi Kamleitner. Wild for Scotland helps you connect with Scotland and dream about future adventures. I'll tell you immersive stories to whisk you away, share some of my top tips for your own Scotland trip, and introduce you to inspiring locals and their stories. So lean back and enjoy. Let's travel to Scotland. Today we are heading back to the Isle of Canna to speak with Isebail Mackinnon. She's a director of the Isle of Canna Community Development Trust, and her family has been calling the island their home for generations. Isebail takes care of the community shop, is involved with the island's renewable energy projects, and runs Canna Campsite, which is where I stayed during this trip. As you can see, when you live in such a small community, you don't just have one job. If you haven't listened to last week's story episode of Stacks and Stones yet, pause now, listen to this story, and then return to my conversation with Isebail. It really sets the scene for our chat about this unique island. But let's get back to Isebail. If you've listened to the first season of Wild for Scotland, you already know that I'm fascinated by the Scottish Isles. There's something about taking a boat to a tiny speck of land surrounded by the ocean. You find unique landscapes, unique communities, and often a couple of unexpected surprises. The Isle of Canna is no different. But as someone who loves telling stories, I sometimes catch myself making up narratives about a place before I ever set foot on it. Before my trip to Canna, I had an idea of the island, formed by books and articles I had read about it, and images I'd seen. But of course, reality is more complex than that, and it was important to me to keep an open mind, let the stories come to me. And that's also how I approached my conversation with Isebail. I wanted to know what it's really like to live on the Isle of Canna, what it takes to be a part of such a small community, and how the Community Development Trust envisions the future of the island. I really hope you enjoy our conversation. Let's welcome Isebail Mackinnon. So I am sitting here with Isebail Mackinnon on the Isle of Canna. Isebail, do you want to start by introducing yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Isebail Mackinnon. I live on the Isle of Canna, and my family is originally from the Isle of Canna. I run the campsite, so run Canna Campsite, Canna Bunkhouse, and I'm obviously part of the Isle of Canna Community Development Trust, so I'm a director with that, and mostly my role there is helping to run Canna Community Shop and helping also with Creole, our renewable energy project.
And have you always lived on Canna?
No, I obviously was born and brought up here and then went away to work in different places, and I've been back on Canna since 2016.
Mm-hmm. And did you go and live on other islands, or was your life off the island quite different than here?
Well, I went to London, worked there, and then I was in South Africa for a little while. Then I lived in a small village on the west coast called Glenelg. And then I went to London for 11 years. And then that's where I was before I came back to Canna.
Now, that's quite a big difference to the Isle of Canna going to London, wasn't it? What was it like to come back?
Just fine. No, it's absolutely no problem. When I was in London, also, I did quite a lot of work in and out of Africa. So I worked in Ghana and Uganda. And I can see a lot of similarities between that because, maybe logistics are a bit challenging, which is something that's relevant to the west coast of Scotland as well.
And have you ever found that living on such a small island, it was difficult to adapt in bigger places with more people, or did you find that quite easy?
Absolutely not, because I think that is really key about the islands, that we're so used to meeting other people because Canna is so busy with people coming in yachts and people stopping over on different boats on their way other islands or places. And so we're used to interacting with lots of different people. So it was absolutely easy for me to be adaptable in another place.
How many people visit Canna in a year? Do you know, roughly?
Well, there's a few sort of different variations on that number. I think NTS are trying to sort of collate some figures. But on average, we have a lot of yachts. So we would say on average, through the height of the summer, there's at least 14 yachts every night. And that can go up as near to 30 yachts in a night. So we have that. And visitor numbers are growing as well, because obviously we now have the campsite and there's another self-catering cottages and things like that. So we don't have any hard and fast numbers.
That's quite a lot of people who come through here.
Yeah, quite a lot. Yeah. But it's nice to see the same people come back again and again, so that we can see the same yachts coming in every year and we get to know the people. And so it's quite nice. You can say, oh, you're back this year again. So
what do you think brings people back?
Some main things that people say about Canna is it's very friendly, it's very welcoming, it's very peaceful. People say it has a very good feeling about it. And obviously on top of that, we've got a wide range of wildlife and seabirds and beautiful scenery and archaeology and geology. So it's quite a small island, but we've got quite a lot packed into it, which means that it's actually quite accessible to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, full disclosure, I have already decided I will come back. I've been here for 2 nights now, and I'm here for 3 in total, and I know that's not enough near to see even a part of the island, and there's places that I've walked to that I know I want to walk back to, and I keep seeing on my walks different parts of the island that I think, oh, I need to walk there, or I want to really go there.
And I think that's true, what you're saying is that, and a lot of people come and they think, oh, it's just a small island and it can come for like 2 nights. And then they're going, oh, actually, we didn't realise there's so much to see and we'll need to come back. So that's one thing. For sustainable tourism, anyway, we kind of ask people or encourage people to come and stay longer. But in order for them to have the best holiday and to see more of the island and really engage with it, then, we would advise people to come longer anyway. And somebody did say that. She said, well, I think they came for 2 weeks. And she said the first week we went out and we did everything. And then the next week we did it again, but the island just kept revealing more to us. And then they just got that deeper sense of it. And obviously then gets to know the community, and, they've been around for 2 weeks, so everybody gets to know them.
Yeah, that's really
lovely. People really appreciate that, and it's nice.
Yeah. And so just for the sake of listeners who haven't been here, the Isle of Canna is what it looks like on the map, quite remote. It's out west, one of the small isles south of Skye, and it's the westernmost of those islands. Kind of west of here is just the Outer Hebrides, and then it's the Atlantic Ocean. And there's only 16 people living on the island, is that correct?
Might be 18 now.
Might be 18 now. Oh, wow, that's cool. So it's quite a small community. And I wonder, at the same time, and we've had this conversation on the drive here, it's not that remote when you live here, because it's your normal life and it's what you're used to, and you have your work here, and it's not peace and quiet. There's a working farm here, there's gardeners, there's people fixing roofs and all these things. So it's a very lively place, and I guess more lively than I had expected. And I fell into that trap of romanticising the island a little bit as well.
I think that's true, that people expect it to be very quiet and us to be living this laid back life. But actually, we're all really, really active, because it takes quite a lot to run an island. And then, so this morning, I've been out gathering sheep and then organising for the stuff to happen at the campsite today. And, then I've been in the shop because there's an order coming in for the shop later on. So there's all those different roles that people on the island are playing. So it is really busy. Yeah. So, and I think people are surprised, because they do come here and they expect it to be quiet, and then it's actually really, really busy and very lively.
Can I ask, what made you decide to come back?
So I was working in London, and I'd finished one job and in the May of 2015, and then I came home for that summer. So I was sort of starting to think about, well, how could I meld my London life and my working in Africa life and obviously Canna, because obviously I wanted it all. And then in the September of that year, my mum had a stroke. So I just said, well, I'll come home and make sure that her care package and everything is in place. And I saw that there was that economic opportunity of running a campsite, because there was an area that was designated as a campsite, but it was just very informal. So there was an opportunity to make that a formal business. And because I'd worked in developing small businesses anyway, that's my background. So it was easy for me to see that that was an opportunity and to build that business.
Yeah. And I get the sense that, especially with smaller islands, a lot of different islands that I've visited and speaking to people who've maybe moved away and then back again, that's what they usually say, both in Scotland and abroad, is that there's a lot of opportunities. And if you can just see them and you can just spot them and you go in with the right idea, you can actually create a really good business for yourself.
Absolutely. And if I always say, well, I wish I had a crack team round me, because there's just so much opportunity here and there's just so much that you can do. And I'd like to do them all, but I can't. So there is lots of opportunity for other people.
So what do you think does it require to move to a small island community like the Isle of Canna?
I would say you have to be proactive. You have to be solution focused, and you need to know who you are, because then, so if you're grounded and you know who you are, then you're able to deal with the challenges. So like the logistics of getting anything done, that is a real challenge for people. And you need to be able to ride out situations where, maybe the boat doesn't come for a week. And that doesn't happen that often. But for us, that's just normal. And it wouldn't bother us. So, and obviously, you don't have anonymity. That's the thing is, so everybody knows who you are and everybody pretty much knows what you're doing. And that's just the crack, But apart from that, it's fine. You just, positive people and who can see opportunities and rub along with other people and not get challenged too easily. Not much to ask.
Well, it sounds very, very different, and particularly, I guess, the anonymity of it sounds so different to what my current life in Glasgow is like, because we've bought a house, we live in a neighbourhood that is very residential, and we do know some of our neighbours, but it isn't a community in the same sense that I've maybe experienced back home, where the building where I grew up in, where my parents have a flat, they knew all the neighbours and we hung out together and all the kids hung out together, and you know everyone and you're almost like one big family, very harmonious, probably as a child more harmonious than it really was. Whereas now my life is very much the opposite of that, and it sounds like this would maybe be more like that even though it's not always harmonious, you are one big community because you depend on each other to an extent, don't you? So
if something happens, then everybody will be there to help you sort it out. So that's, everybody just kind of pitches up. So that's a really great thing to have.
Yeah. So we've talked a bit about the downsides, but what are some of the benefits, the advantages of living on such a small place?
For me, it's great. I have the freedom to run my business and do it really well. And I suppose it is a small community, but we work well together. And for me, it's a real advantage to be here. I've got something I can work with. There's a community. We're really driving ahead. We're really trying to do things. Obviously you can see that we've been really successful in the shop and the moorings and our renewable energy. So it's really, it's inspiring to be part of that. And it's inspiring to be part of actually the small isles, because we can share with the other islands and we can see what they're doing and we can work together on projects. So that's really great. And obviously you see that it's a beautiful, fertile island. So I'm able to develop another business to do with growing fruits for produce and making jam and chutneys and things like that. So there's just lots of opportunity.
Amazing. because you mentioned the other islands, I'm quite keen to talk about the current ownership model here on the Isle of Canna and how that differs, because each of the small isles is different in the way it's run or managed or owned at the moment, isn't it? Muckus has a landowner.
Yes, so they're privately owned. Egg is community owned. Rum is part community owned and part nature scout.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a nature reserve. And then Canna is owned by the National Trust for Scotland, apart from there's one of the crofters owns their own land, and I'm in the process of buying my own croft as well. So I think there's 9 crofts on the island. But anyway, it's all owned by National Trust for Scotland, apart from that.
But then a lot of it is managed, or a lot of the development is managed by the Development Trust. Or how does that connection or how does that relationship work?
Well, what we have now is the Canna Partnership. So that's a partnership between the Isle of Canna community through the Isle of Canna Community Development Trust and the National Trust for Scotland. So that might have started in something like November last year. So it's still in its early stages. So we're just trying to pull together the resources of both organisations and the knowledge of both organisations to try and take forward development on the island that suits both our needs. So obviously National Trust for Scotland has a certain remit as a conservation charity, and then obviously we have our remit as a community, to make the island sustainable.
So what is really interesting about that partnership model, of course, is as an outsider, you don't really know how these things work and what goes into owning an island and running an island and managing the community and providing for the community to an extent as well, I guess. And I guess one of the things some of the things you've been saying about locals starting their own businesses and being able to develop in that direction is a really great way to contribute to that partnership, isn't it? It gives people, even though they might not own their own land, a way to do their own thing and live on the island and contribute to the community, and in partnership with the trust take care of the island as well.
Yeah, I think because people own businesses and they're in control of their own lives, then they have a sense of ownership of the island and a sense of commitment to make it work for everybody and to develop, but also to ensure that it develops in the way that we want it. Mm. So while a few of us run tourism businesses, we're very aware of that we don't want to overdevelop the tourism on the island, because this is our home and we need to have a sort of level of tourism that suits us, that doesn't. So we're very happy for people to come and share and enjoy our island with us, because, we love our island and we understand why so many other people would love our island. But it needs to be at a level that doesn't impinge on our lives on the island, because that's why we enjoy the island. That's why we love it. So that's a very clear thing. And that's something that we share with the rest of the small isles. And we've brought together a group called Visit Small Isles. So that's one person from each island. And we're trying to make sure that tourism for the small isles is sustainable and it's of benefit to the islands, but it doesn't, that we retain the great things about the small isles, but we invite people to come and visit our islands and share them and contribute, because visitors are very happy to contribute, and that might be economic, but it could also be by coming to be volunteers, to share in their skills, to share in their expertise. So it's not all just about pure economics. Mm. And making friendships, and then sometimes people will come and be a volunteer on the islands and then actually decide that they want to move to the islands and they want to live here. So, and that certainly has happened.
Yeah. And so what are some of the things that people can do while they're on Canna? What are some of your favourite places that you like to share with people when they're here on the island?
Well, so Canna is obviously great for walking, but walking to see wildlife, walking to see the geology, and to look at the archaeology. of the island. Those are the great things. But yes, there's just masses of wildlife and wildflowers and everything. So some of the best walks, I would say, to go to Garrisdale, which is it's probably quite a bit of a walk, but it's really worth it. So if you walk to the end of the road at Tarbert, and then you go out along the northwest coast, and then there is a path down. You can drop down into the old settlement that's at Garrisdale, and there's a beautiful little sandy beach there. And the seal, that's where the seals have their pups as well. So that's, it's a great time to come later in the year to see that. But you can drop down into Garrisdale, and it's just a really nice, lovely place. And you're looking right out to the Outer Hebrides as well, and up to the sort of northern end of Skye. And you can see where people lived there. Yeah, so it's a really great place to go. And then obviously you can go out to the very west end of the island and see out to Heisker, and straight then down to Ardnamurchan Point. So you can be on Canna and see everything that it has, but you can look out onto the rest of the world and the rest of the Western Isles.
Yeah, in many ways it's very centrally located and not remote at all, because it is kind of halfway in between the mainland and the Outer Isles, and you see, or the Western Isles, and you see all these other places. And I assume you can see Coll on a clear day.
Coll and Tiree. Yeah, I could see them last night, actually.
Yeah.
And I suppose probably in the past there was a lot more connection between here and the Outer Hebrides. So, but not so much now. But I think people also think that Canna's remote because you can't see it from the mainland, because it's tucked in behind the rest of the small isles. So unless you're right down at Ardnamurchan or up on Skye, you can't see it. So I think people think, oh, it's really, really remote. And maybe Calmac thinks that sometimes too.
Well, we are now going to hear a little clip from one of my walks on the island here. I walked out to Sandy to see some of the puffins that nest there on the sea stacks and the cliffs. And I'll take you with me on a little taste of that walk. And now I'm sitting here on the edge of Sandy, that second island that is connected to Canna by a bridge. And I followed the little trail and the signs that said, well, they didn't read anything. They had little pictures on them of birds that are nesting here on the island. There are many birds that nest here on Sandy and also on Canna. Arctic skuas, I can see many of those flying around in the sky. They're also called bonxies here on the west coast of Scotland. I can see many types of seagulls and shags and guillemots. I think they're guillemots, the little black and white ones, nesting on the cliffs of the rocks. But I can also see two sea stacks, one smaller, one really big sea stack, covered in yellow lichen, made from basalt rocks. You can almost see the columns, although they're not as clear as those on Staffa. And at the top there's a layer of soil and there's grass, it's green, and there they are, all the little birds gathering in their colony. Of course I'm talking about puffins. As I walked up to the edge of the cliff, they all started flying up, moving in a cloud of birds, like I've only seen starlings do before, and they flew in an H shape towards the cliffs, towards me, away around the stack and back. And now most of them have settled on the rocks, but some of them are still flying about, and they do tend to come towards me. I can see even more of them in the ocean, sitting on the waves and probably fishing. Some of the birds that fly past me have beaks. Their beaks full with little silver fish, and they fly really close. It's very hard to capture because they're so fast and so small and approaching from below the cliff out of nowhere. And even across on the stack where they're sitting and resting, it's hard to really capture them without a zoom lens, which is now firmly on my... There was just a puffin that flew really close to me. I thought it would land, but it didn't. really difficult to capture the puffins without a zoom lens, which is now firmly on my Christmas wish list. And a bit of gear that I will definitely bring on my next trip to Canna. And there will definitely be a next trip to the island. Not just to see the birds, but also to spend more time with the locals, getting to know people, getting to know the island, walking around it. It's a small island, there's not much to do as such, but it is an island that I think I would love to see more of and love to spend more time in. The weather has completely surprised me. It was very, very rough all day, and now it's just opened up. I can still see the clouds on the Coolins and Rum, but I can also see the beautiful cliffs of Rum and sky up in the other direction in the distance. Also the Coolins there are covered in clouds, and so are the very top of Canna as well, actually, behind me. But the sun is out and there's blue sky and the puffins are flying around me in clouds of stuff, starling-like clouds, and I'm just having the best time watching them, even though I can't capture it on camera. It's in my head, and I'm so glad I made the decision to come here, even though I'll probably get back really late and I'll probably be very hungry by the time I get back. It's worth all that, just to see the puffins. Now let's take a quick detour and hear a story about our sponsors.
Hello, Wild for Scotland listeners. My name is Fran Turauskis, and you know me as the co-producer of Wild for Scotland. But I'm here to tell you about another podcast in the Tremula network. On the Outside is for anyone that spends their time outdoors in the UK and wants to engage in the wider outdoor community. Each episode you'll hear a diverse range of enthusiasts and experts talking about the news stories that matter to them. We look at everything from specific sports news to the social issues and events that shape the way we experience the outdoors. In previous episodes, we've talked about Southern Water dumping sewage into our seas, a racist stunt on Ben Nevis, and whether climbing gyms should ban topless climbing. So if you want to hear conversations and opinions on what's happening outside, search for On the Outside in your podcast app or head to ontheoutsidepodcast.co.uk.
So on my walk to Sandy, I could obviously not miss the renewable energy scheme, the windmills that are out on the island. And I've seen comparable schemes that are owned or run by communities on other islands on South Uist, for example. And I just wanted to ask you about, what led to that, and what does it mean for the island to be a bit more reliable on renewable energies and less dependent on fossil fuels and kind of other means of producing energy?
Yeah, so we have our renewable, so that's owned by the community. So it's called CREEL, so Canna Renewable Energy and Electrification Limited. And so that's the 6 wind turbines, and then we have an array of solar panels. So that's that, and then there is a diesel generator there if we need it. Each of the small isles, they're all run on sustainable energy. So it's part of the whole drive to make the islands more sustainable. So it's been, what led to that is that I think it's been a very, very long conversation. So it's probably been about 30 years in the sort of talking about it and trying to make it happen. And eventually it did happen in 2018, and we have that system now in place and owned by the community. So it means that we generate income, but it means that our environmental impact is better because we're not burning diesel 24/7. And it's great because we have our own maintenance teams and we run it, and there's a great sense of ownership and a great sense of pride in it that we have that system. But I mean, we are actually looking now at what we need to do to increase capacity, because we have lots of new developments coming on board. So we're going to be building 3 community-owned houses. So we need to make sure that there's enough electricity for that. Yeah. So
where are those houses going to be built?
So there's going to be one built beside my house in the Change House Park. So that's just near the sort of phone box around that area. And then there's 2 going to be further up the road past the farm. Mm-hmm. So there's that little sort of cluster of houses there. So they're going to fit 2 in there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that's going to be great. Yeah.
And do you already know people who are going to live there? Or is it going to be, are you going to call for families to move in again, or people to move in to apply again, like in the previous years? Or
well, I think
how is that process going to go?
It's probably going to be a mix. So there might be people who are in existing houses on the island that might want to move to one of the new houses. But there might be people who want to move to the island. And those people who want to move to the island might be people who are connected to Canna and who are looking for an opportunity to come back. Or they might be absolutely brand new people.
I've always wanted to move to an island. I was having this conversation with Aileen yesterday about what someone needs to bring with them to move to an island, and we had a few ideas floating about, so I thought I would ask you as well. What is a community looking for in someone who's moving out here?
Well, skills would be useful, but more than skills, it's people's attitude that they're able to muck in, but they're able to be people need to be self-contained. People need to know who they are. But if people have skills and they're willing to share those, then that's obviously super helpful.
Of course.
So yes, somebody who's prepared to be part of the community and just help us, because it's about capacity, and we only have enough capacity to be able to do a certain amount of things.
Yeah. And so what are some of those things? What are some of the future plans of the community? Where do you want to see the island go? What are some of the projects you're working on?
Well, we do have a Isle of Community Development Trust development plan, and part of that is growing the population. So we have a sort of what's sort of seen locally maybe as a sort of tipping point of around about 28-30 people, which can help, because at the moment if one person leaves, it's a huge impact. But if there's 30 people and one person leaves, it's a little bit less of a whole left. And so we're building 3 community houses. We're building a visitor hub to provide services for all the yachts people that come in and other visitors, wild campers, etc. And we are looking to develop Corrigan Barn, which is beside the big volcanic beach there. So we're doing that. So we have a development manager, Andrew, who's been working on the housing and all our other projects. We're looking at developing a sort of wedding market, because well, we've already had one wedding this year and we're just about to have another one. But it's a beautiful venue for a wedding, a small wedding that you can take over the island for your wedding. And we've got the little Rue Church up there, and we've also got the little St. Columba's Church up the road as well. So lots of beaches and things to have your photographs taken of. So those are some of the projects that we're trying to take forward. And we've also got we've got a lot of decarbonisation work going on as well. So looking at our energy uses, looking at how we can make our energy use more efficient. So looking at things like water. Do we have enough water? Or how do we manage our water, which is probably more important than the amount. So it's looking at our resources and look at how we're managing them as well.
Water is that a big issue here on the island? I know there's not a lot of fresh water available, or is that wrong?
Yeah, there actually probably is quite a lot of water available, because we've got about 4, I think there's at least 4 springs feeding into our system. And I think that they might just have last year brought on another couple of springs. So it's not so much about the amount of water, it's about storage and management. So I think managing that resource and making people very aware of their water use as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yes, usually every year there is a period where we, it gets a little bit dicey and we have to, not water our gardens type of thing.
Which is something I guess many people, especially maybe listeners from abroad, wouldn't think about, because doesn't it rain all the time?
Yeah, apparently it rains all the time in Scotland. But we are in Scotland, but we are on the Gulf Stream, so we quite often have different weather than other places. So
absolutely,
and it can be really mild here. So people have that sort of picture of Scotland about snow. So we might get snow, but it doesn't really lie. We might get frost, but it's 1 day or 2 days. It's nothing. And it's only like a light frost. It's not. I think people even from the mainland think that, you must get really wild weather out here and it must be crazy and it must be really hard. And I said, well, no, because some places on the mainland, you get really, really cold weather. You get a lot of snow. You might be stuck up a glen somewhere, and we just don't have that.
Yeah, and I guess the way the village or the main settlements are positioned as well, they're sheltered from a lot of directions with where they are on the island, and then the big rain clouds they'll be carried over the island all the way to the mainland and break in the mountains. Yeah,
usually, thankfully, from the sort of prevailing westerly wind, that weather just moves through quite fast.
Yeah.
So that's quite helpful.
I was surprised yesterday with how warm the wind was, because even though it was very windy, it was not cold. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's quite nice like that.
I know there has been a lot of attempts or a lot of approaches or different ways to try and develop the community on the island and grow the community on the island. And I know there have been setbacks and things didn't work out. And I'm just wondering, what are some of the issues that you're facing with that? And what do you think needs to change for that to be more successful in the future?
Well, I suppose now, I think people, because in the past, I suppose people were trying to take initiatives to increase the population, but that's quite a challenging thing to do. So I think people have learned from that experience. So maybe going forward, people maybe are a bit more, as a community, we're more equipped to do that. So that's on sort of on our side of it. So being more equipped and kind of understanding what we're offering and what we're trying to do. And then also for people who want to come here, it's about making sure that what their expectations are and what their preparations are to come to an island like Canna. I think that's is to try and match those two things up, really. So to be really kind of realistic to people about obviously the advantage of moving to Canada, but also some of the it's not disadvantages, it's just the realities.
Yeah.
So people know what they're coming to, because there is that romanticism about islands and about, it's a little remote place and I can go there and hide. Well, you can't, because, you're living round the bay and everybody knows what you're doing. So, it's in some ways people, I find that exposure a little bit challenging. So, so there is a romanticism about this nice, easy lifestyle and where, and there are so many wonderful things about lifestyle in Canada, but it is quite hard work and it is quite busy, and there's probably quite a lot of expectation put on somebody that you're going to muck in and you're going to get on with things and you're going to work quite hard and work towards, buy into what we want Canada to be. I think that's it. We expect. I suppose I'm from the island, so I have a kind of, maybe I have quite a clear picture of Canada, and I always think, well, whatever you do, is it good for Canna? And if everybody keeps that in their head, is this good for Canna? Then that's okay. And we can really sort of take the island forward.
Yeah. I guess it's almost like a way of collective living rather than a very individual lifestyles that I'm certainly used to and sometimes don't like.
Yeah.
And I guess our society has kind of moved towards this whole individualistic way of life, and everybody's for themselves, and you just do what you think is best for you or what you want to do or how you can find your own dreams. But then thinking about the collective community and the best for the island, that's quite different.
Yeah, it's a kind of, there's sort of two parts of it. It's very collective, but sometimes people keep themselves quite separate as well, because you can't be in each other's pockets all the time, because then it just becomes too intense.
Yeah.
So we mix, but we don't mix. So
you need to be able to keep your own.
Yeah, you need to keep some individuality and keep some sort of separation,
like in a good relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Keep your independence, but muck in when it's needed.
Yeah. And so how does the relationship between the 4 islands work? Particularly, you mentioned Visit Small Isles and kind of coming together to promote sustainable tourism to the region and to the different islands. How does that work? How do you come together?
I suppose as a family, we've probably got quite long-term relationships with people on other islands. But it's great, because the other islands are always really helpful. So when we were doing the renewable energy project, and then obviously Muck and Egg and Rum already had their projects in place. So we were just able to phone them up at any time and say, well, how did you get on with this? And how did this work for you? And also people who to work with. They were able to recommend project managers and companies that they'd worked with. So that, so people in the small islands are always really, really helpful and encouraging to each other in community development projects. So that is great. And it's really inspiring as well, just to go and meet with the other communities and see what they're doing. And one of the things our development manager is doing is developing like a small isles project pipeline, so that we can come together and develop, instead of every island doing housing, can we just do a small isles housing project? And then we're looking at a small isles housing management company, instead of each island having community housing and then running it individually. Can we do it all together? And then maybe we can build skills within the communities, such as joiners or gas engineers, that type of thing. And looking at tourism is also another way for us to come together. And so through Visit Small Isles, have a sustainable tourism strategy for the small isles. Because a lot of people don't even know what the small isles is. Because it's like, oh, what's Canna? Is it in the Inner Hebrides? Or, is it part of the Outer Hebrides? And it's like, well, no, we're the small isles. So it's trying to put the small isles on the map.
Yeah.
And build a kind of Visit Small Isles, a bit perhaps like Visit Faroes type of thing. Because we're all different and we're all unique, but we share communities and we share a lot of similarities as well. So we want to build on that strength together and invite people to come to the small isles, come and visit the small isles, visit more than one small isle, because they are different, but contribute to it. So, Egg's got a volunteer programme. We want to develop a volunteer programme as well and look at people coming and staying for a bit longer. So I think that's a really where I'd like Canada to get, is that people can come for lots of different lengths of time. So maybe you can come for a week, but maybe you could come for 3 months, or maybe you could come for 6 months. That has happened in the past, but just once or twice, and that has really been of benefit to the island. But obviously, accommodation on Canada is the issue. So that's how we work together as the small isles, trying to do projects together, trying to get the CalMac service that we need, and to encourage each other as well. It's really key.
And I think in that way, you probably get a lot of strength out of being together and knowing that there's other islands that are in it for the same reasons and with the same vision, and you're not the only ones. You're not alone fighting for these things. Like, I can imagine standing up to a big company like Calmac might be quite intimidating if you're on your own, but it might be a bit easier if there's a group of you and a few more voices.
Yes, and maybe other organisations like the Small Isles Federation, that type of thing, to try and get them on board. But it is very important that the Small Isles come together and we have a voice and we make our voice heard, because we're not a big island group like the Orkneys, the Shetlands and the Western Isles, and the Highland Council has got a lot of islands, but we're not Skye, we're not big like that. So we need to make sure that our voice is heard.
Yeah.
It's very, very important.
One of the things I like, and I've actually, before I came here, so I've been planning this trip for years, like I told you, and I actually found the post-it note that had, from years ago, that had all the ferry schedules on them, thinking about in what way I can come and visit Canna, but also I've been to Rum twice, maybe also visit Egg this time, or Muck. And it didn't happen in the end. I didn't have enough time to hop around. But it is actually one of the few places in Scotland where it is fairly easy to hop from one island to the other, because it's one ferry that services all the small isles, and it will have stops along the way. Not always all four, but it kind of does these rounds. It might not always be as easy if you're on a time limit, but if you have a bit of time, you can hop from one island to the other.
Yeah, but we would say we've lost some of that interconnectivity that we used to have, because the Saturday ferries have been altered, and that was a real big challenge for us this year. And we've ended up with a ferry service that we do not need and we do not want and doesn't suit us. And so we're really sort of now preparing to work with Calmac to make sure that we do not have this ferry service next year, because we've lost that interconnectivity. But it might be, maybe if you come from the mainland, you can go to one or two islands, but to go in between the islands is really difficult. Because, for example, Eggs just had its 25th anniversary and they invited us to go there on the Friday. But we couldn't do that, because if we wanted to go to Egg for the Friday, we would have had to leave here on the Wednesday.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have got back until the Saturday.
Right.
So that's just not
realistic.
That's not realistic at all. So it's quite hard. Thankfully we have the internet, and we have our own locally run internet as well, which is based on Egg, which is amazing. Hebnet. Thankfully, we work through Zoom meetings and things like that, because we can't always get together. Yeah. But it would be so beneficial if we could. Yeah. We would get so much more out of it.
Yeah. Well, all the best with that. I really hope that works out. And maybe that's why my old post-it note schedule didn't work out. Yeah. But next time I visit, hopefully it will be back to a more suitable and more useful service to all
and maybe develop into an even better service. The other way we come together as the Small Isles is the Small Isles Games, which is run every year. And we challenge each other there. So it's going to be an Egg this year. So it goes to a different small isle every year. Yeah, so that's always a fun way for us to get together.
And is it a day long, or how long does it take?
Yes, so it's a day long and then dance at night.
Nice.
Yeah, so it was great. Last time we had it on Canna, it was great, beautiful sunny day. It was fantastic, and everybody came, and it was really good. And we had Kaylee at night. It was brilliant.
Well, if people want to have a look at what that looks like and what that feels like, they can watch the Summer on Canna documentary on YouTube. I watched that, and I did see the footage from the Summer Highland Games, and it looked like it was so much fun. I had to laugh out loud at the adult sack hopping competition. That was my favourite part. And the lamb race. I've never been to Highland Games. I don't know if they do that everywhere, but the lamb race was my favourite. Is there anything else you want to bring in?
Come visit.
Obviously, come and visit Canna. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. What is a way that people can stay up to date with you and what you do on the island or the island itself? Where can they find you online and stay in touch?
You can stay in touch with the Isle of Canna because we're online. So we have Isle of Canna community Facebook page. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter, and we have our own website as well, which is theisleofcanna.com.
Super. I'll pop all those links in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking the time and speaking to me today, sharing so much about your life and the island itself. I've definitely taken away some things to think about, as well as some tips for my next visit to Canna. Some walks I need to check out. And yeah, everybody visit Canna, but do it in a sustainable way. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Isebail Mackinnon for taking the time to sit down with me and chat about life on the Isle of Canna. You can find out more about the island and the work of the Community Development Trust by visiting their website or finding them on social media. You can also connect with Isebail and her business Canna Campsite on social media. I'll pop all those links in the show notes. If you feel inspired to plan a trip to the Isle of Canna, head to my Scotland travel blog, watchmesee.com, and find my detailed Canna travel guide for lots of tips and inspiration. And with this, I send you off to dream about island life on the Scottish Isles. Next week, we have a new story for you, and this time we're staying firmly planted on the mainland, even though the ground we'll be walking on is still constantly shifting and changing. I bet you can't wait to find out where we're headed next. Thank you so much for listening to Wild for Scotland today. If you want to make sure you never miss an episode, hit subscribe and sign up for our weekly newsletter full of peeks behind the scenes, tips for further readings, and occasional sneak peeks of what's to come. The link to sign up is in the show notes. Wild for Scotland is part of the Tremula Network, adventure and outdoor podcasts off the beaten path. The show is written and hosted by me, Kathi Kamleitner. Thanks to Fran Turauskis, who is the co-producer and editor and does the sound design. Podcast art is by Lizzie Vaughan-Knight, the Tartan Trail Burner, and all original music is composed by Bruce Wallace. Until next time, when we travel to a different place in Scotland.